From getting out of prison with a fake gun to building elaborate underground tunnels, this is the craziest prison escape tier list. Pascal Payet broke out of prison with a helicopter 3 times, solid A tier. Stephen Russell dyed his prison uniform to blend in with the guards and got out without anyone noticing, C tier. Frank Abagnale Jr. convinced prison officials he was an FBI agent, so they opened the prison gates and allowed him to walk out. Solid S tier. The whole thing started in 1971 when he was transferred to the Cobb County Jail in Georgia. The U.S. Marshal forgot to give the prison his detention commitment, so the guards just assumed he was a prison inspector sent by the FBI. When Abagnale found out, he decided to use this to his advantage, which isn't surprising since the main reason he was in prison in the first place was because he kept impersonating everyone. He was a pilot at some point, worked as a doctor for a year without any medical training. His friend on the outside even got him a business card to make the whole thing legit. And just like that, Abagnale became the boss behind bars. The first time Michel Vaujour got locked up was in 1985. He was a nice young man who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just kidding. He was an armed robber who tried to kill someone during a robbery and got 18 years for it. Michel was also a busy man with places to be, so even before the judge hit him with a long sentence, he already knew how long he would be staying in prison. On May 26, 1986, his wife Nadine flew a helicopter to the roof of one of the prison buildings. She started taking flying lessons the day he was arrested in preparation for this day, and they say romance is dead. That was just one part of the escape plan. Inside the prison, Vaujour managed to convince the guards he had a grenade. They didn't want to get blown to pieces, so they let him walk. He got into the helicopter and flew away. Surprise, surprise, the grenade turned out to be a fruit from the cafeteria that was painted green. Great acting. A freaking helicopter. A criminal love story worthy of a Netflix series. That's definitely an A. Nobody ever got out of Alcatraz alive. 36 people tried. 23 got caught and the rest died. Except for Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, and Frank Morris, who managed to dig a man-sized hole with a spoon. The project took 6 months. And in case you're wondering how the guards didn't find out 3 men were digging into a ventilation duct up under their cell's sink, well, they played the accordion to cover up the noise. They also crafted paper heads resembling their own faces with discarded paper and hair from the barber shop. Seriously, A for effort. In the wee hours of June 11th, 1962, Morris and the Anglin brothers tucked their doppelgangers into bed and climbed into the ventilation duct. They got out through an unguarded utility corridor before swimming away from the hellhole using inflatable rafts they made from stolen raincoats. They were never found. Ronald Silva identified as a woman and got a get-out-of-jail-free card. Before he got locked away, Silva worked in the pharmaceutical industry, but the Brazilian government didn't like the kind of products he was pushing, so they threw him in prison. First, he tried getting out the old-fashioned way, getting his men to invade the prison with big guns and big bombs. That only earned him a straight ticket to a much more secure prison. He then convinced his wife to come visit him in prison with an extra pair of clothes, shaved his legs and arms, got into his wife's dress, and with a cute wig and a dash of makeup, Ronald's transition was finally complete. It was so convincing that he actually almost got away with it. But after he got out of the prison walls, one of the guards saw him struggling to walk in high heels and thought that was unusual. So he brought the pretty lady back into the facility and sent him right back to his cell. It was a weird plan, and he couldn't get away with it, so that's a D. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was another big player in the pharmaceutical industry who knew a thing or two about evading the authorities. When they finally caught him in 1993, El Chapo slipped out like an action star after bribing a prison guard to push him out of the facility in a laundry cart. A pretty lame plan if you ask me, but El Chapo was just getting started. The next time they caught him was in 2014, and just like the first time, he slipped out again. His men spent months digging a tunnel under the prison, setting up an electrical system, air ducts, and even a modified motorcycle. By the time prison guards noticed El Chapo wasn't in his cell, it was already too late. The tunnel led to a cinder block house a mile away, built by his men to hide what they were doing. If you ask me, this is probably the most famous prison escape in history, so I'm going to give it an S. Between 1936 and 1947, Yoshie Shiratori escaped from 4 different cells. He was known as the Harry Houdini of Japan. After his 3rd escape from prison, the police decided to lock him up in a place no one had ever escaped from: the Abashiri prison. The prison food was the biggest punishment of all, but it was also the salty miso soup that paved his way out of prison. Every morning, Yoshi coated his cuffs and the frames of his narrow food slewed in miso soup. It was a long process that took more than a few months. Yoshi was patient, and by August 26th, 1944. The cuffs and frames had rusted so badly thanks to the salty soup that he effortlessly slipped out of them. He then dislocated his shoulders to squeeze out of the tiny food slot. C tier. Radion Fayyad escaped from prison twice. On April 13, 2013, he blasted through 5 prison doors and held 4 prison guards hostage before leaving in a getaway vehicle, which he then burned as soon as he was out of the city. B tier. Fayyad got caught a month later while hiding out in a hotel. He was sent right back to prison. On July 1st, 2018, a helicopter landed at a prison in Real with 3 armed men and a flight instructor who also doubled as a hostage. The 3 men had posed as flight school students before pulling out their guns and directing the man to the prison. This was Fayyad's one-way ticket out of prison. The helicopter was later found miles away after Fayyad and his men switched to a car. George Rivas, Michael Anthony Rodriguez, and 4 other criminals were serving varying sentences at the John B. Connolly unit. That was until December 13, 2000, when the 7 inmates gave themselves early parole for bad behavior. Following a delicate escape plan, the Texas 7 overpowered and restrained 9 civilian maintenance supervisors, 4 correctional officers, and 3 inmates who had no idea what was going on. The whole thing took place during the lunch hours, when prison guards usually relax their surveillance. They knocked each victim unconscious, removed some of their clothes, tied and gagged them, before placing them in an electrical room away from the alarm system. They also stole credit cards, clothing, as well as ID cards from the victims. They then impersonated prison officers on the phone, dishing out false stories like you-know-who, just so they could ward off suspicion from authorities. Some of them then pretended to be maintenance workers, got into a pickup truck, and headed straight out of the facility. It remains one of the most famous prison breaks in American history. Solid C. There was a war in Northern Ireland most people don't know about. It was called the Troubles, ravaging the region in the 1970s and 80s. It was during that period that the British government incarcerated hundreds of Provisional Irish Republican Army, or IRA. They were locked in the Maze, the most secure prison in Europe at the time. The IRA inmates believed they were prisoners of war, and they wanted to get out, so they banded together and smuggled 6 handguns and bullets. They took the H block at gunpoint, disarmed the guards, took their uniforms, hijacked a food delivery truck, and headed out to the gate. They also took the guards at the gate hostage, and as they were just about to leave, other guards began to arrive from their shift. Imagine coming into work and seeing a bunch of inmates holding your co-workers at gunpoint. As more officers arrived, the ones held hostage got a bit of confidence and decided to fight back. Someone sounded the alarm, a fight ensued, leaving 1 officer dead, and now the guards just wouldn't let them leave. Only 38 of them managed to escape by scaling the fence. When they got outside, the reinforcement they expected to find wasn't there. There were no getaway vehicles, so they had to flee on foot. The whole thing was so poorly planned and too messy to be considered a proper prison break. E tier. Choi Gap-bok was a yoga master who knew how to bend his bones and bend the rules. He was arrested on suspicion of armed robbery on September 12, 2012, and spent 5 days inside a police cell in the city of Daegu. By the 5th day, he was so bored that he decided to check himself out of prison. He applied skin ointment all over the upper part of his body, then with the power of yoga, contorted his body to fit in through a tiny food slot at the bottom of the cell. The entire escape took only 34 seconds. He also covered the bed with pillows and blankets so the guards would think he was still inside. By the time they woke up, Choi was long gone, but his contortions could only carry him so far, and he got caught shortly afterwards. C tier. 12 inmates at an Alabama Sunday night tricked the jailer into opening the outside door using, you'd never guess it, peanut butter. A tier. The jailer, who probably just blew in from stupid town, was trying to open the cell door for one of the inmates to get back in, but the inmates had covered the cell number with peanut butter, so he ended up opening the main door instead. 12 inmates escaped before the guard realized what was going on, and within 10 minutes, they scaled a 12-foot fence and sprinted away to freedom. Richard McNair mailed himself out of prison. He was a murderer serving 2 life sentences for murder and attempted murder. He also wasn't a big fan of prison, so he tried to escape 3 times. The first time he used a lubricant to get out of his cuffs. The second time he crawled out through a ventilation duct, but it was his 3rd attempt that turned him into a legend. In prison, his job was to repair old mail bags. That was when he decided to get creative. If you can mail packages, you can mail a person. He constructed an escape pod, fitted it with a breathing tube so he didn't end up as an actual package, jumped in, and simply hid among the pile of mailbags. When the delivery drivers came to get the repaired mailbags, they had no idea they were transporting special cargo. As soon as McNair was outside, he cut himself free and ran for his life, but then he got spotted by the cops. He gave 2 fake names, told fake stories about where he was coming from, and although the cop really thought he fit the description of a runaway prisoner, he decided to let him walk. He even managed to skip town, ending up in the 51st state, Canada, S tier. John Dillinger escaped from an inescapable prison with a fake wooden gun. He was a special prisoner, locked up in the most guarded part of the jail. But on March 3rd, 1934, he suddenly brought out this black pistol-like thingy and told the guard to let him out. He caught them by surprise, so they just let him walk without firing a shot. Making a fake gun in prison is pretty hard, but the hardest part was convincing the guards you had an actual gun. A tier. In 1995, 3 prisoners escaped from the HM prison Pankhurst with a fake key they made by memorizing the patterns on the actual key. Andrew Roger, Keith Rose, and Matthew Williams were in prison for different reasons. Roger and Rose killed someone, while Williams was just a noble citizen who liked making bombs and burning things. They all worked at the prison's metal shop, giving them enough time and materials to build a ladder to help them scale the walls. The most impressive part was how they memorized the patterns on the jail key, crafted their own version, and surprisingly it worked. And they got the sweet taste of freedom, at least for a few days before they got caught again. D tier. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more amazing content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.